Good morning, everyone. My name is Bazad. I'm going to host the WorldTeach India program webinar today. If everyone can hear me, if you could just find the chat box and just type in that you can hear me, that'd be great. We're going to wait about 2 minutes just to see if anyone else is joining. And then we'll begin. There's a, oh, perfect. So, yeah, it looks like everyone can hear me. And can everyone see the screen, the WorldTeach India program slide? All right, fantastic. So, just give it 30 more seconds and then we'll go into it. All right, we're going to start. So, good morning, and my name is Bazad Larry. I'm the program director for WorldTeach India. The goal of today's webinar is to introduce listeners to the WorldTeach India summer program. And this webinar will be recorded, and you can have access to it afterwards. And for all of you who might need to leave early, you can always check back in later to that recorded video, and it'll, I think, also get emailed to you. The attendees on this are people interested in the WorldTeach India program, and then we've got 2 staff members, Heather and Caitlin from WorldTeach, and we've got a volunteer from last year, Arjun, and myself on the call. I'll just give a brief introduction about Arjun. He's currently at Tulane. I think he's majoring in neuroscience, and has had a really fun time getting to know him. Last year in Ladakh, he was placed at a small private school called Lambden in Nubra Valley, and ended up playing a lot of soccer and teaching a lot of English. Good stuff. All right, let's get into it. So this is our overall agenda for the day. Arjun and I will start by going through the program. Then WorldTeach and I will cover logistics. Finally, we'll save some time at the end for questions from you. If you've got any questions, you can just type them into the question box where you let me know that you could hear and see. Sorry, I got disconnected for a second. So this is Ladakh. You know, why is it special? It's this small landlocked region in the very north of India, surrounded by the Himalayas to the south, by the Tibetan Plateau to the east, and the ranges of the Karakoram to the west. So it's seen a tremendous amount of history over the last 2,000 years. The Silk Route from Central Asia flowed down through the mountains over here, through the many high passes, and descended into parts of India. And it's seen a lot of invasions over time, a lot of different power struggles, and was part of the great game between the Russians and the British about 100 years ago, when they were both trying to colonize parts of Asia. So it's got a really interesting mix. It's got a very high number of Tibetan Buddhists and Ladakhi Buddhists that live here, and the Dalai Lama comes here almost every summer. The fellows last year got to visit him and hear him give some teachings in the Nubra Valley last year. And it retains a really interesting sense of the old world that is coming into the new. There's still a whole lot of sustainable practices, people living on homesteads and farmsteads, growing their own crops, but still connected to the modern world through tourism, through actually a lot of tourism. There are about 2 million people that visit Ladakh every summer to explore its mountains, to visit its villages, and to check out the monasteries. it's a really special place for me because it gives a really unique mix of India, of Central Asia, and of Tibet. And I think it's one of the safest places, one of the cleanest places, and certainly one of the least polluted places in India and possibly in the world. We run this program primarily because being such a distant place of the world is a resource in terms of education, in terms of access to high quality teachers. And so when we have the kind of applicants that apply to WorldTeach with their Western degrees, with their ability to give some of their time teaching and interest in helping underserved communities move forward, then it's really important to also be able to access some of these areas that are less than fully resourced. And so I think it's a really great combination of combining a low resource area with qualified and confident teachers. So in general, this is the program overview. It runs about 8 weeks. The locations are mostly semi-rural. There are some villages which are connected by road. There's Wi-Fi. There's it's about 2.5, 3 hours to the biggest city, which is Leh, which is the hub of the region. And the main focus of the program is on climate change for the teachers in terms of their own learning, whereas the teachers themselves will be focused on teaching English and computer literacy. And then for those of you who are interested in sports, there'll be plenty of opportunities to do that because the kids literally play all the time. The partnerships we have with schools are either with government schools, which are the most under-resourced, and then with private schools, which have better facilities that are better funded. And the teachers also seem to be a little younger and more interested in what they're doing, and with monastic teaching placements, which are basically ancient monasteries from the medieval ages, 15th century, 14th century, which have actually really solid educational programs for young monks. The monks learn English, math, sciences, and are in general educated quite well. As historically, monks in this region have been some of the few people who have been able to read and write. We're going to be starting off with an orientation. You'll fly to Delhi, and then you'll fly up. We'll meet you at the Delhi airport, and then we'll fly you up to Ladakh, which is about an hour's flight or so across the Himalayas. The first day or so, we're going to just hang out and acclimatize at the high altitude, and then we're going to kick it off. Before you arrive in India, we're going to have a pre-departure orientation, which is mostly conducted by WorldTeach staff in the US. Caitlin and Heather, could you chat a little bit about this?
Hi, yes. Thanks, Behzad. My name is Heather Tang. I'm the Senior Director of Programs here at WorldTeach in Cambridge, Massachusetts. During pre-departure, we focus to prepare our volunteers as best as we can to arrive in country, and that can include anything from, the most important thing is if it requires a visa, getting you that visa or guiding you through the process if you have to get on your own, as well as a lot of resources for packing, finances, links or resources or information from previous volunteers or our field staff about life in the country. We have a lot of program literature that describes kind of living in the country, living in India and Ladakh, and teaching in the classrooms there. So that's kind of mainly the gist of the pre-departure part. All of our staff here in the US are readily available to answer your questions if you have them as you're preparing, and then also getting information from our staff in country, Behzad and his team, to best prepare everyone as they get ready to go onto the trip.
Great, thanks, Heather.
Sure.
So when we then arrive in Leh, we're going to head to a part of Ladakh called Nubra Valley, which I find the most beautiful. It's hemmed in on one side by the Karakoram Range, and then on the other side by the Tian Shan Range of China. We're primarily looking to understand from our perspective and from the volunteers' perspective how Ladakh is coping with the very, very real threats of climate change and how it's affecting the land and the people. And we're going to get an immersive experience in working in an area that is holding on to its traditional self-sufficiency while it's embracing this modern world. The orientation sessions will include learning how the school systems work, especially the private or the government school system where you might be placed, and the monastic systems. We'll have Ladakhi teachers on hand to share their personal experiences with the challenges and the fun parts of working within this system. And we're also going to meet with one of our local friends, Zubair Ahmed, who runs a organic farm and an organic and a small trout raising fish farm, and talk about how he is basically getting this very, very cut off region of the world access to certain things like being able to enjoy proteins through the winter, because it's the high passes cut off access because of being snowbound to the region. So most people are without solid, good quality proteins and without fresh vegetables. They mostly survive on things that have been frozen from the summer harvests, from the time you will be there. So it's basically supposed to get you a good perspective of Ladakh, of climate change, of understanding how this climate change not only affects people in Ladakh, but is actually connected to the world. So when you come back to the US, you can also integrate this into your teaching and your learning about the world at large and its interconnected systems. Arjun, what are a couple of the most important things you learned during orientation, and what were you surprised by?
In Ladakh is just an unbelievable place, and in order to be prepared to stay there for several weeks for this program, you definitely need to understand your surroundings. In that, like, you really need to know the different customs. Like I'm of Indian descent, and I've been to India many times before, and Ladakh is unlike any other place in India I've ever been. All the people are very friendly, and they're very open, but you definitely want to make sure that you understand kind of the way of their life. And so in that regard, orientation was very helpful in terms of settling you and understanding kind of where you are, your surroundings. It was also very helpful and informative in the schooling system of Ladakh, understanding how the schools operate, the kind of schedule that you're going to be working with, the different teachers and schools that you may be staying at, is also something that you'll cover in orientation. And they're all very helpful in just getting you prepared for the program. Obviously, the experience, you kind of learn as you go, but orientation is very necessary when it comes to just setting the stage and getting your expectations ready for what you're going to face while you're in Ladakh. You also learn a little bit about climate change, which is very cool for your own intelligence, because Ladakh is very unique in that regard. Thanks, Bazar.
Thanks, Arjun. So when you arrive, we're gonna be camped out at a nice little guest house in Sumer Village, sort of not too far from where this picture is taken. This is actually Jessica's homestay, the small building on the right with the yellowish walls and the red windows. That's where she stayed, and her school was just a few minutes walk down the road. But we'll basically house most of the teachers at either homestays or at boarding facilities that are part of the school itself. It's a very, very interesting experience being at a homestay. The homes are warm. The families are just spectacularly welcoming. They're very, very generous. They're excited to have someone new in their community, and they're just incredibly grateful that someone has come from so far away to teach their kids. So it's really the whole village gets involved, you know, the 10, 15, 20, 30 families, depending on the size of the village, get very, very involved with welcoming you. There's a little banquet when you arrive. There's the school throws a little party. The kids are all very excited. So it's just as a cultural experience, absolutely spectacular to be a part of this welcome and just to live in this house. Oftentimes they won't let you do things just because they would like their guests to not work. So they'll you know, initially not let you serve yourself or, you know, pick things up yourself. They'll want to do those things for you. But as you slowly become part of the family, you'll see, you know, it's a whole lot more fun being able to cook, being able to laugh and chat in the kitchen at meal times, and become part of the family. You know, maybe even take some of the animals out to graze with your host siblings or with your grandpa, or just be a actual part of Ladakhi life. What does this translate to in terms of living conditions? Many places have internet, many places don't. Some of the more rural places definitely will not have it. There'll be a phone connection, and you'll be about an hour and a half or 2 hour drive from the village of Sumur, where you will get internet and have access to restaurants and or rather a couple of cafes. The power comes intermittently through the day, but it's there generally at night. So most people get to love their power banks. There are some places which have generators and power generating facilities, but during the daytime, it's a really nice climate, so you don't actually need electricity for surviving in the way we do in the West. The toilets are both Western style toilets and Ladakhi composting toilets, which are pretty neat, and you get to learn how to use them pretty quickly. They're not smelly, and they're not like toilets that India is known for in a negative sense. They're actually pretty clean and efficient. Arjun, could you help me out with telling us a little bit more about the opportunity you had to explore different housing types, and what did you enjoy most about them, or what did you find the most challenging?
Yeah, well, I ended up throughout the duration of my program moving several times. Initially, I was staying on site at the school in their guest house in Sumur, and that was a great experience just to be so close to the kids, because it was just very easy for me. Like, I would have all my meals with the children during those days, and I would also get to play with them after school let out, because some of the kids stay on site in the hostel. So that was very gratifying in that sense. Living conditions, they were pretty great. I like to camp, so I had a sleeping bag with me, but I was the only volunteer to bring a sleeping bag with me. So I like to use my sleeping bag, so I used it then. But the rooms were very comfortable. The accommodations and the power were there when you need it. It was kind of nice actually to have kind of a different system to operate like that. Like, we weren't constantly checking our phones or anything. We were kind of enjoying life as it came to us. Eventually, though, I moved to a hostel to stay, or sorry, not a hostel. I stayed at a homestay, which was essentially living with another family in Sumur, and they had a farm there, and Behzad is 100% right when he says these people are so friendly, and they really just, initially they at least don't want you to really lift a finger, which is very nice. But as time goes on, you are allowed to do more and more, which was fun for me to kind of get out of my comfort zone. And it was pretty gratifying. Like I was doing farm work. I'd never milked a cow before. I was able to do that. It was it was a great experience, and I would definitely recommend it.
Thanks, Arjun. So, coming to one of the more meaty aspects of doing the WorldTeach India summer program, it's really all about community engagement, and it's not just about being able to teach, you know, a class or 2 or 3 a day, but also to get to know the region you're living in and to see where else you can engage. The community generally comes together in the summer in a really big way when the HHDL, or His Holiness the Dalai Lama, visits. And His Holiness is a living God for most Ladakhis. So when he arrives, it is a huge, huge event. Everyone from every single village will get dressed up and they'll head down to wherever he's giving his sermons, and they'll all basically be in a mood for a huge picnic. This obviously leads to the volunteers getting a lot of community engagement time. A lot of people are interested in what they're doing here, who they're living with, what they're teaching, and then of course the question comes up, well, do you have more teachers for our schools? And so there's you know, a huge sense of engagement by the community itself in wanting to lead better lives and have access to certain standards and certain new ways of thought. And so this picture here shows our volunteer last year, Beatrice, who had set up a little litter-free campaign in one of the villages where she took all the students from the school out. And they basically cleaned up the village, collected a whole lot of trash, and set an example in this very, very remote mountain village in between China and India and Pakistan, where everyone got to learn the benefits of keeping their surroundings clean, not littering. And it's the sort of litter you find here is mostly, you know, maybe a wrapper from a package of cookies or leftover juice boxes or bottles of Coke. So it's recycling is not very prevalent because it's very remote, and so obviously you've not got access to such facilities. So it's an interesting project to come up with, and it was really well received in the village. When we have volunteers stay year after year, it'll obviously change the way the village thinks about things like recycling or being happy with certain environmental norms and ways of life that we have come to understand as being the best for protecting our planet. There's a lot of engagement available for after-school sports and activities for those interested. The kids literally play all afternoon after school, and they'd be most happy if you were to join their game or help learn cricket or teach them how you play soccer or any of your favorite games back home. There's a lot of opportunity to assist with your host families, whether it's helping take care of animals, helping in the farm, helping repair some part of the house, or just in general do many of the tasks that are present on a rural property. In terms of living with the students, Arjun, can you tell us a little bit about your after-school engagement and your favorite memories connected to that?
Yeah, sure. Some of my favorite memories from the program were the after-school activities. These kids have a crazy amount of energy, and it's a joy to kind of be able to hang out with them while they're just running around. And they have many different games, and they're more than willing to teach you some. I know that one of the requests that I was given from some of the boys who stay at the hostel was to teach them baseball. So shortly before I left, I was able to teach them the different rules, but I think they preferred cricket. So that was one of the great memories from the recess time at the Lambden School in Summer. But I also had just a great time getting to know all of these kids. Like they have so many questions for you, and it's pretty exciting to be. They just bombard you with question after question, and it's really fun to just talk with them because they have very inquisitive minds and they're always pretty curious. And so just being able to get to know them, they really want to tell you about their family and kind of all the things about them, what subjects they like, and what their favorite games are. It's definitely a joy to be a part of, and I'm happy that I did it.
Very cool. So the teaching experience, the center of your reason to be here. There a few different placement types, like I mentioned before. Some of them are very under-resourced schools, and it really brings into focus the impact of this program. When we provide an American teacher with obviously years of schooling in the US and a way of doing things, what it does more than simply provide another human being to bring some knowledge to the school is it provides a very different type of perspective. A lot of the educational systems in India focus on rote memorization and on learning through simply reading up a book, memorizing it, and basically regurgitating that information without perhaps getting to actually process what that information or that knowledge was. And so oftentimes you will have students basically be asked a question and they'll repeat the answer perfectly, but they won't actually know what the question or the answer actually mean. They just know that when someone asks me this question, this is the right answer to give. And so introducing someone who has learned in a different education system to this enables not only the students, but also the teachers to gain a different perspective of a way of teaching and a way of learning that is not focused entirely on memorization. Instead, it's focused on understanding and on basically the students being able to get underneath the actual issue and be able to break it down and be able to reply to a question without having previously memorized. And so when you're doing that, you automatically are able to then also help everyone's English come up to speed a little bit more. They get active practice of speaking to a non-Ladakhi in English, as opposed to not being able to get some headway in English and then just simply being able to switch into Ladakhi. So it's important that the students get access to your English, but more importantly, I think, the impact it makes on the teachers, because the teachers are going to stay there for decades and you're only going to be there for 8-9 weeks. You should really be looking at transferring as many of your skill sets to the teachers who will be in place for decades to come, because empowering them means that these kids have access to a better way of education and a better resourced, better taught teacher. And all the teachers have college degrees and many of them have masters, but at the same time, they themselves have had experiences which keep them in a way of life that is still disconnected from even things that are going on in India's larger cities. So they're not up to date on the newest teaching methods or methodologies. They're not up to date on how important it is for children to be free thinkers and to be able to process information in meaningful ways instead of simply knowing information. The age of the children, it's some of the smaller schools will have kids as young as 4 up till 14 or 15. Some of the larger schools will have full classes, about 200, 300 students, with grades 1 through 12 represented. And some schools are simply middle schools and some are simply high schools. The interesting part about access to school resources is that most schools in most parts of India do not have nearly anywhere near the resources an American school does. They won't have whiteboards, they won't have access to computers in the classrooms. There'll be a small computer lab, but most likely it will be underused because even the teachers themselves are quite shy about the limited experience with computers they've had. So For after-school activities, one of the most important things volunteers can do is, in fact, teach the teachers how to use the computers instead of focusing on the children. Obviously, the children are useful, but just even getting one teacher comfortable with a computer is going to be life-changing for the other teachers, for getting them connected to the internet, and for being able to use the World Wide Web as an actual resource. So that is an interesting perspective as well. Arjun, another question for you. What did your classroom experience look like, and what was the most challenging part of teaching in Ladakh?
That's a great question. I mean, it's something that everyone in the program will obviously have to face at some point. I was not super prepared in terms of knowing exactly how I wanted to teach a class in Ladakh. And so when I was given the opportunity, I wasn't exactly sure how to get the most out of the students while I was there for such a brief time in the span of like a year. I mean, they have class or school for so many months and you're only there for several weeks. I really wanted to be able to make an impact while I was there. Eventually what I was able to do is I was able to draw on my knowledge from previous language learning classes. And I was really surprised with how well some of the students responded, because we really did want to get them a little bit out of their comfort zone when it comes to learning English, because the English that they had learned, although good in a certain way of like knowing certain words and advanced grammatical constructions, they weren't so confident as speakers. And that was something that, at least when I first met them, that's what I wanted to help focus on. And so what I did was I designed a skit, or a skit prompt rather, for the students to partake in. And that was something that I knew that they had never been asked to do before, because it took several days for them to understand what I was asking them to do. And it was unbelievable, because these kids are so creative. They didn't really realize that they had this power to create such a dialogue and interaction between their groups and be able to use English in ways that they hadn't really used it before, because they hadn't really had full conversations in English in the way that I asked them to have them. And it was pretty cool to be able to see them, because they have the intelligence to do it, and to be able to witness them using it for the first time was a great experience. And yeah, that's
very cool.
Yeah,
thanks. So it's interesting to note that almost all of our volunteers last year were not actually teachers. One of them was mid-career at a large Midwestern American company. One of them was finishing her master's in psychology, and two of them were in their bachelor's programs. So it's interesting to see that these are non-teachers committing themselves to time of service and teaching. And it's also interesting to see how they themselves go through the change of learning what it means to be a teacher, and what sort of preparation that needs, and what sort of time commitment that needs with both the teachers and the students. At the end of the program, we have this end of service retreat, which basically is a journey around Ladakh to some of our favorite spots. I spend maybe 9 months a year in Ladakh, and a lot of that time is spent when we're not engaged with the WorldTeach program. A lot of that time is spent trekking and camping and leading people on photography expeditions to some of the most remote parts of Ladakh. And so we add some of that experience of ours to bring our WorldTeach volunteers to some very, very cool places. We've got camping and some trekking, and some really fun, luxurious tents in the middle of nowhere that we take our volunteers to. Oh, hold on, I forgot a question for Arjun. So Arjun, tell me, as we go towards the question and answer stage, how did this program impact your future goals, or your education, or your career path?
That's a great question. I guess I'm still in the process of exactly figuring it out. But I mean, the way that the Ladakh program changed me was something I hold very close to me. I think that it was an experience that I had never really felt before, in that going someplace that I was very unfamiliar with, and I did not really go in with expecting anything out of it. I was able to find one of the most beautiful places in the world with some of the most wonderful people, in that, like, they're so nice and they're so gracious, and they love to talk to you. Like, you say hi to everyone you see in the street, even if you don't know them. And that's just a great custom to have, in my opinion. And so in that regard, it was just kind of great to see a different community that was so happy and so full of life. And then in another regard, I mean, I'm a neuroscience major at Tulane University. Teaching was not, it's not part of the typical curriculum of what a neuroscience major does, but I thought that this would be a great opportunity, as someone who is not used to teaching, to be able to put themselves in a situation where I've never been before, really, and be able to see how I adapt. And everyone here is so nice, and they help you through everything, and it just makes the program so much easier and fun to do, in the regard that it just makes your job as a teacher more fun and more exciting, to be able to wake up in the morning and say, I'm looking forward to going and speaking to English in front of all of these Ladakhi students and teachers, to try and make a difference in the world. And it has really helped me focus myself career-wise, just in terms of grand scheme, what I would like to do as I go on in my career, where I want to focus, and how much of a difference I want to make.
Great, thank you. This is a picture from the end of service. We were camping by a really high altitude lake, and it was raining, and then we got these magical double rainbows, so we all ran underneath. That's Arjun in the middle in the blue jacket, so you can tell he's having a transformative experience. The quote is from one of our volunteers last year, Jessica Black. Heather, could you give us some more information about the application and logistics? And then on the next slide, also tell us about the TEFL certification.
Thank you, Behzad. I will actually step in for Heather at this point. My name is Caitlin Ivester, and I'm the Director of Communications at WorldTeach. But prior to that, I was the Director of Admissions, so I can talk a little bit about the admissions process, and then Heather will jump in and talk about the TEFL. So I'll just go quickly through this, because I'm sure you guys have some questions about the program itself, but the applications are due on the 1st of April. I think pretty shortly you'll see that slide come up on the webinar presentation, but April 1st, 2018 is the deadline. That includes filling out an application through our online system, just if you're on our website, clicking apply now and getting that started if you haven't already, and then submitting a personal statement and a resume. There are some prompts for the personal statement that you can answer. We're looking for some experiences you've had that you feel have prepared you for this program, and then also some challenges that you've overcome in the past, and just why you're interested in participating. And then the final material that's needed is a letter of recommendation. So once you have all those in, your application's complete, and then from there you hear within 2 weeks about a final decision. We're very happy to answer any questions that you have. You'll see that some of the basic requirements when that slide comes up is that you're a native level English speaker, at least 18, between the ages of 18 and 74, flexible, open-minded, patient. All of those qualities will serve you well when you're abroad. And then just having a genuine interest in the topics that we presented tonight, and a lot of passion for immersing yourself within that community. All of those are really important. And if you're interested in talking with prior alum of the WorldTeach India program, or alum of WorldTeach in general, we're happy to do that for you. And with that, I'll have Heather step in and talk a little bit about the TEFL certification program.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. So WorldTeach offers a TEFL certification program separate from the program fees that we have for each program, but a very valuable piece of the experience as it's accredited by Accreditat, which is an, let me just make sure I get the description right for the body. It's an international accreditation body that sets rigorous standards for accreditation of TEFL companies. And so once you have the TEFL certification with WorldTeach, you would have access to the TEFL certification community as well as a very valid and respected certification to put on your resume, and also use the skills that you build with that program to apply to further teaching or opportunities that you look for in the future. So for the summer programs, the WorldTeach TEFL certification is 130 hours of total training, the equivalent of 130 hours total training, but then you also have 25 hours of practicum, and then you actually engage in about 200 hours of your engagement in educational setting. And that would be your time in Ladakh teaching in the classrooms with your students or with your communities. The price for the TEFL certification for summer programs is $195, which from our market research is well below what you'll find out there for just the course. And what the course consists of is a pre-departure observation period. You just have to go and reach out to a classroom that does TEFL teaching, whether at a school or a college or at an institution, and you have to fulfill the pre-observation hours and then fill out an online course. And then once you're in Ladakh, you would undergo some training during orientation, and then also have of course, your teaching time in the classroom. So it's really a valuable resource. A lot of volunteers have done the certification already. We've had it for several years, and we've gotten a lot of positive reviews in terms of how the pedagogy that they've learned in the training really helped them both in the classroom, and then having the certification afterwards was really an asset for their credentials and whatever they decided to pursue next. So that is, you can find more information and details about it on our TEFL page on our website. I'm not going to go through every single part right now because it's all there for you to look at yourself. And then if you have any questions about it, you can reach out to TEFL Cert at worldteach.org to get more information, and also if you want to pursue it to get that going. Behzad, back to you.
Thank you, Heather.
Sure.
So guys, we're open for questions now. You can put them into the little questions tab on the third from the bottom, and we'll be about 15 minutes. And if you've got any questions at any other point, you can email WorldTeach or email us directly at india@worldteach.org. So I've got a question from Riker here. Has the program date set yet? Yeah, the dates are up on the website at worldteach.org /India Summer, I believe. But in 1 second, I'm just gonna let you know. I believe it starts in July.
Here, Behzad, we actually don't have the program dates posted on the website because they're confirmed a little bit later than when we update the information on it. I'm just going to pull it up right now. If you can wait 1 second, and I can tell you the exact dates. It also seems like your connection might be a little bit broken up. Can you still hear us? So while Behzad gets his connection
back. I can hear you guys.
There you are. There you are. Okay. So for the India program, the dates are June 3rd to July 29th for a total of 8 weeks. think I got a question from Amy. Can I repeat the dates? Yes, it is June 3rd to July 29th. Are there any other questions?
I can jump in. I actually see a question from Riker about planning their flights. So Riker asks, is there a specific time window that we should hit? And so Heather, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the confirmed volunteers will be provided with the date and then a window of time that they'd need to arrive at the airport. And from there, everyone would arrive within that window, and then there would be transportation to orientation.
Yes, that's correct, Caitlin. Thanks.
And then another question from Riker. Sorry, I got disconnected. My internet has decided to slow down substantially. In case you can't hear me, I'm just going to type it out here. Sorry, I'm having really bad internet connectivity.
Yeah, Behzad, we can actually hear you now.
Okay, perfect. I'll just answer Riker's question quickly. The program costs cover pretty much everything except for stuff you might choose to buy for yourself, such as food or snacks or any sort of personal stuff. Your meals are covered under the program, your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then for your visas and your shots and things like that that are pre-coming to India, those won't be covered. But basically this covers your entire time in India, including your domestic flights from Delhi to Ladakh. Heather or Caitlin, could you answer Amy's question about how many applicants?
Yeah, Behzad, I can speak a little bit about how many applicants we get. So WorldTeach, just as an organization, gets thousands of applicants a year, but people kind of really see themselves in one program or another. So from there, it really narrows down to what program you feel passionate about. So since India is one of our newer programs, we're in the second summer, it doesn't have as much of the history of reviews and volunteer stories as others do. Behind it that have been around for a decade or more, but at the same time we've seen a lot of interest in the program and a lot of admiration of the material that's been provided and what the volunteers have accomplished in previous cohorts, and especially of Behzad's photography, which you guys have been admiring throughout the webinar. And so we see a good amount of applicants, but we don't really have kind of an upper limit to how many people can go into the cohort. And so we're definitely taking a really holistic view at applications and seeing who seems to be a good fit with the program and who demonstrates a real genuine interest in participating. So I would definitely say, while other cohorts have been less than 10, we really could see a different number this year, kind of depending on how many people apply. And I think that the interest is growing every year, especially in this program that's a little bit newer than the others. And definitely, if you have any questions about your application and how to make it the best possible, or how to upload anything, then we would be happy to answer your questions. You could just email us at admissions@worldteach.org.
No, another question from Riker about travel documents. Are there any travel documents aside from a passport that will be necessary to bring along? And is there a recommended list of things to bring? Should we bring outdoor gear if we have it? Riker, we will be sending you a packing list, which will be pretty detailed. So that'll cover what you should bring. In terms of outdoor gear, all you need to really bring is your clothing. You don't really need any tents or sleeping bags or things like that. We provide all of those. For travel documents, all you need is a passport and an Indian visa, which will just be a simple tourist visa, which you can apply for online or in person or by mail at the closest Indian consulate that is zoned for you.
Behzad, let me add something on for the visa there. For the tourist visas, they're valid for 6 months once you get it, but they are valid immediately after you are issued the visa. So what we have on our pre-departure guidance, kind of the timeline that we provide, is when exactly that you have to start applying for your visa so that when it's issued, it is valid for the duration of the time that you are in India. If you get it too early, you might have it run out in the middle, which we don't want. So we have to make sure that you get it at the right time.
Good point. All right, guys, are there any other questions? Send them across in the next 2 minutes. And of course, if you have any more questions after this concludes, we will be able to answer them at india@worldteach.org. Are there any health precautions you recommend we take before arriving? Well, you know, your doctor will be the best person to give you recommendations on it, but Ladakh is not an endemic malarial place. Doesn't really have any mosquitoes, and it doesn't have any known mosquito-borne illnesses, but your doctor is going to be the best person to give you advice on that. We recommend that you're up to date on all sorts of vaccinations.
Behzad, if there aren't any other questions, then feel free to type them in if anyone does still have any that pop up. Could you give us just a quick background of your experience and what you do?
Oh, so sorry, I forgot to include that in the beginning. I basically started out my career working in international development. For a short period, I worked for the Clinton Fellowship, which is a program that lasts 10 months in India, and I was a Clinton Fellow working on waste management in India. I originally was born in India. I moved to the US when I was about 15, went to Colby College in Maine, went to high school in New York. And then beyond that, I started basically working abroad in India, in Eastern Africa, and then in the US. Eventually, I started my own travel company, which focuses on learning either through travel or learning different things while you're traveling, such as photography. And so Voygr, our company, is a partner of WorldTeach, and we execute the WorldTeach program in India. Besides that, we also do tours and trips to Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan. And hopefully we'll be starting programs for teaching there in the future. I've got one question from Amy about dietary restrictions. I'm a vegan. In India, it's quite easy for vegetarians because that's a very well understood and known concept. For vegans, you can simply let your family know that there are certain things that you cannot consume, such as milk products or other animal-based products, and they'll be happy to comply. We can also shop for certain things that you like eating in the bigger markets of Leh, And this way you can be, well stocked with certain things, just in case your family forgets someday or doesn't, it takes them a little while to understand the concept fully. They might, of course, question you, and there might be some interesting conversations and debates, but that is all a part of the homestay experience. But I think, being Buddhists, it should be an interesting conversation around veganism and about the Buddhist philosophy to not harm things. So yeah, but it should be okay. So guys, we're gonna conclude the webinar. Heather and Caitlin, anything else? Oh, there's one last question from Riker. I'll just answer it. Would it be helpful to attempt to learn a bit of Ladakhi? For sure. The sooner you start a language, the better it is. If you start now, you will be much better prepared than anything we can teach you in 5 days or 7 days of orientation. We will provide you with a list of helpful words and a little yellow book on learning Ladakhi. But there are some resources online, and if you send me an email at india@worldteach.org, I will send you some links that we have found useful ourselves. That's it. If you have, again, any further questions, send them over at india@worldteach.org, and then I will let Heather or Caitlin have the last word in before we end the webinar. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Faisad. And definitely, I'll just echo your words that if you have any questions at all, feel free to send them to that address or to admissions or info@worldteach.org. I know attendees are in varying stages of their application process, and so we're just happy to help you. Check out our website, of course, for any additional information. We will have this webinar recorded and posted, so we will be sending it out to all registrants again as well, so you can refer back to it. And yeah, feel free to reach out to us. We are really happy to be your resources, and again, we can set you up with people to talk to about their own experience in India with WorldTeach as well. And thank you so much, Faisad, for taking the time. Thank you, Arjun, for sharing your experiences on behalf of WorldTeach. And Heather and I really thank you for being here. And thank you all for attending. It's really great to see how many people are interested. And once again, we're happy to answer your questions, and we hope you join us this summer. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Arjun.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.